So I'm going to tell you in this video exactly why I'm not going to be buying a home for a very long time. But most importantly is at the age of 24, I actually went ahead and I bought my very first property. You might be wondering, Tommy, well, you bought a property, so what are you doing with that property now? The answer is I'm actually selling it because I actually made a mistake. Now, as you guys know, I am very transparent. When I make money, I tell you about it. When I lose money, I tell you about it. And this is one of those deals where I'm probably just gonna break even. And in reality, it was actually a terrible deal to begin with. In this video, I'm gonna break everything down and be fully transparent. I'm also gonna tell you exactly why I might not recommend for you guys to actually go ahead and buy a house in the first place. But most importantly, don't believe anything I say. Just run your own numbers and make sure things actually make sense. Now, as always, guys, like this video on top, but also subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified. Now, the very first thing, guys, is this. First off, when I was 24 years old and I went ahead and I bought this home, it was not because the market was hot, it was cold, interest rates was very low. No, it was all based on a personal decision, me saying, hey, I can afford to buy this home. And at the time, although today I think it was a mistake, at the time, it was one of the most rational decisions I could possibly make because everything was being checked off that list, okay? One was, hey, Tommy, can you afford to pay for this home? The answer was, yes, I can afford it. Hey, Tommy, number two, does this make sense mathematically? The answer was, yes, I'm going to be living here for 5 years. At the time, by the way, this is all happening in Puerto Rico. And I'm saying, yeah, I'm gonna be here for the next 5 years. So mathematically, logically speaking, it makes sense. And it was rational. It made a lot of sense. So now, if all those things were true back then, well, why is it that today I'm actually selling this home? The answer is there's one major point in every single decision that you're going to make. And that point is basically you are making decisions for a stranger at the end of the day when you actually break it down. And you might be saying, Tommy, how does that make sense? What do you mean you're making a decision for a stranger? The answer is, well, that version of me, 24-year-old version of me, is a lot more different from the 12-year-old version of me. And also the 26-year-old version of me today. In those 2 years, a lot of things changed. At the time when I was 24 years old, I was willing to say, hey, I'm gonna stay here for the next 5 years. I'm gonna save some money on taxes. I'm gonna have this house here, it's fully paid off, great stuff. I'm just gonna be here. But now my version, or my current self, I'm kind of like, I don't really want to do that for 5 years. I actually prefer to just be closer to my family, my friends, be in a church where I actually, for example, learn a lot of stuff. And all these things are a major factor. So when I was 24, I was thinking rationally at that point, but now at 26 years old, it's not as rational as I thought it was at the moment. But it's not to say never make a decision because you're always going to change your mind, but it's to say at the time you have to make the best decision possible. And the great decision I made was I bought a nice home, I fixed it up, and I make good decisions overall. So at the end of the day, what I can hope for is to actually break even and not to actually lose any crazy amount of money. And that's the cool thing, okay? Because rule number one is never lose money. And rule number two is don't forget rule number one. So Tommy, what exactly is the next plan? So if you actually go ahead and go through this whole thing, you sell this house, now you have this cash, obviously, what are you going to do with this cash? If you're going to be staying, for example, in the Dominican Republic, where I am right now, are you going to be planning to buy a house exactly, or are you not going to buy a house? The answer is very simple. You know, when I was around 19 years old or so, I heard the most profound piece of advice I ever heard. It was so simple that I ignored it, and it was by Warren Buffett. And he said, you buy a house when you need a house. Remember, okay, a house in itself is not an investment. You're probably just going to break even, but it creates a lot of leverage in the sense that it lowers your risk level. It decreases your cost of living. It gives you the ability to have more, well, to have less friction in your life and to be able to say, hey, if I have a paid off home, my expenses are extremely low. So I'm able to just basically invest more money, give more money away, do exactly what I want to do. And there is a lot less friction in my life. So at this very moment where I find myself, I don't want to make any rushed decisions in the sense that Me, where I am right now, I'm probably not going to be buying a home for the next 5 years or so, because mathematically, one, I can afford to go 5 years without buying a home and paying rent because the numbers make sense. And how do you figure this out? You do a rent versus buy calculator. Number two is buying a home is not a flexible asset. You know, if I change my mind about a stock, I sell it, boom, that's it, right? But a house, I change my mind. Now I have to wait for somebody to actually buy this thing. And that can take, for example, a month or 2 months or 3 months. It takes time for the transaction to actually take place. So I don't want to put myself in a position where basically I find myself having a lot of inflexibility. So when exactly am I planning to buy my next home? The answer is God knows, right? But overall, I'm probably thinking about, I don't have a wife. I don't have any kids thus, right? So it's kind of like when I have a family and I'm getting ready to start my whole family thing, well, then I'll probably say, hey, do you think it's a good idea between me and my wife? Do you want to buy a home? And then we actually go ahead through it, buy a home, raise a family there, and so on. But mathematically speaking, it makes a lot more sense for me to just rent. Well, I figured exactly where do I actually want to live, And by the way, there is one thing, okay? You got to understand that the media, the average person, your parents, everyone out there pushes you to go ahead and buy a home, right? Just buy a home, buy a home. But in reality, if you don't know exactly where you want to live, if you don't exactly where you actually want to set roots, and if you don't know if you actually want to buy in that area, or if the numbers don't make sense, it just doesn't make sense overall to buy a home. The average person and their decisions, they're illogical in the sense that they're making decisions that cost them money and don't make them any money whatsoever or lower their risk. So the average person is broke. And that's not what you want to do. So you have to kind of just sway yourself away from that idea and that way of thinking and just make the best possible decision based on your numbers. Okay, so that's one main reason. So what exactly am I going to be doing in the next few years, next 5 years? The answer is one thing is I'm gonna have that money in cash sitting in savings accounts. That's going to be my home savings, okay? You might say, Tommy, but what about inflation? Aren't you worried about that? The answer is, as long as I'm not gonna have that money in there for more than 5 years, I'm not really that worried about inflation in that sense. I'd rather have the cash and have the option than not have the cash and rush into other investments just for the sake of avoiding inflation. That's also a very stupid thing to do. So in the meantime, while I have that cash there, it'll pay me some interest, something, nothing crazy. But with my extra cash that I'm actually going to have in savings, I'm probably going to be looking at some investment properties to actually buy. Now, when I buy investment properties, it's expensive because I've decided to buy them in cash. So it might mean all I can afford is maybe a $50,000 condo or a 60K condo, buy one every year or every other year and just buy them slowly. When the time comes to actually buy a home, like a personal home, when it actually makes sense, then I can say, hey, I'm actually gonna buy this home, but I also have rental income coming in. Now, all these decisions, you kind of have to think them thoroughly because even when you buy investment properties, I wouldn't want to buy an investment property in an area where I know I'm not going to be living in a sense, okay? Because that's also another thing to actually put into perspective. So again, decisions have to be rationally made, but you also have to be very aware that your mindset, your ideas, your preferences, they might change in the future. So the best thing to possibly do is make the most rational decision in the moment. So overall, guys, it's not like I'm never going to buy a home, but the answer is for right now, I'm selling my home. I'm going to use that cash set on the side, and I'm also going to be looking at potential investment properties if it actually makes sense. But I'm not going to be rushing into anything for the sake of just, hey, I need passive income or I need to avoid inflation. Remember, take things step by step. It is better to have the option than not have the cash or make bad, stupid investments. That's one big thing you always have to consider when you're putting your money to work. Okay, guys? As always, guys, thanks for watching. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to get notified. And by the way, I'm probably just going to break even here. But the experience, it was the best way to learn is from somebody else's mistake. So I won't tell you it was well worth it, but I learned from my own mistake, and that's the hard way. But if you can learn anything from my video and this mistake that I basically made is when you're making a decision, even if the math makes sense, sometimes just wait a little longer. If you're thinking about buying a home and you're really sure you want to do it and math makes sense, maybe just wait just a little bit more. And make sure everything actually falls in place and so on, all right? But if you have everything set in place and you're ready to go, ready to go. if it makes sense mathematically. By the way, the math to buy a home is this. If you made it all the way to the end, that's why it's so important you make it all the way to the end of the video. Is basically when you buy a home, make sure it's no more than a third of your monthly income, than a third of your monthly income on a 15-year mortgage. That is math. That is the idea. Thanks for watching. I'm TommyBryson. Peace.